It's your boy Luke, back again for another PGA Tour course breakdown, this time for the Zozo Championship, where we're heading back over to Japan for the first time in over a year, to going back to Narashino Country Club, which we've seen plenty of times before on tour. We've had some of the best players in the world win here, including Tiger Woods, Gary Player, and Seve Ballesteros. So somebody this week looking to add their name to that very selective list. And on top of that, obviously got a ton of DFS contests out there, the betting board if any of you are interested in that. But what we're going to do here in the video is we're going to give you a complete breakdown of this week's event. We're going to talk about the field real quickly. We're going to talk about the course, of course. We're going to go hole by hole because this is a course that we don't see a ton on tour. Make sure you guys are very familiar with it. We'll talk about the kind of players I expect to succeed here, some of the key stats I'll be looking for in a golfer this week, for players I think that will succeed well. So overall, no matter your skill level going into this week, I'm going to make sure that you're prepared for this week's event. So without further delay, let's hop right into the course breakdown for this week. So starting off with some details here for the Zozo Championship. This is an invitational field, much like what we saw last week at the CJ Cup. So going to be 78 golfers playing, and of course, no cut. So it was very helpful for me last week. I had a couple guys get out to some bad starts that ended up making a ton of birdies down the stretch, it being relatively optimal plays in terms of fantasy. So I always like no-cut events. Makes it a little bit less of a stressful event to watch, especially if you're on the fantasy side of things. We have a boosted purse, just like what we saw with the CJ Cup. And in terms of the makeup of the field, we have 60 PGA Tour players, plenty making the trip from Vegas to Japan. Some of the highlights in the field, including Colin Morikawa, Xander Schauffele. We have Hideki, who's the hometown guy, as well as Sungjae. We have 8 sponsorship exemptions, and many of them being PGA Tour players. 7 Japan Tour players, so the top 7 in the Japan Tour, all going to be playing this week, as well as the top 3 from the Japan Bridgestone Open, which was played 3 or 4 months ago. So the top 3 from that event that weren't in the top 7 of the Japan Tour will end up playing this week as well. So overall, a good mix of guys that have top-end talent, people that we don't see very often, especially in terms of their sponsorship exemptions and these Japan Tour guys. And overall, I'm expecting a relatively similar vibe to what we saw at the CJ Cup. A golf tournament where it's relatively gettable. You're going to get an international field, and I expect at least one of those Japan Tour guys to go out and have a good week. So I'm excited for it, and that's what we've got in terms of a field. But now what you guys came here for, the course breakdown. We're going to be playing this week at Narashino Country Club, which is a part of Shiba, Japan. And again, we've been here before, but just not a ton. We've never had shots gained data here either, so trying to take a look at the numbers this week isn't going to be possible. But this course, just from a general sense, is a very American golf course, especially for a Japan-style course. Obviously, other than the 2-green setup, if you guys are new to Japan golf courses, over there they have 2 greens on every single hole. One of them will be with a summertime bent grass, one will be with a type of grass, usually bent grass, that's a little bit more resilient in the winter. And the whole reason for it is over in Japan, they obviously get a full range of seasons. So as a result, in order to keep golf courses in good shape for the entire year, they have 2 completely different greens. So it's a relatively interesting thing that they do over here. We're only going to see the summer greens open, so it's not like they're going to change from one green to the other in between rounds or anything like that. The winter greens aren't going to be in very good shape. So just keep that in mind. You're going to see 2 greens when we go through the course breakdown here. Don't be alarmed. They're only going to be playing the green that is connected to the fairway. That's how they make that readily apparent, especially for flyovers, which are going to be in play for this week. Again, the last time we were here, we saw Tiger Woods win this golf tournament. That is the last win that Tiger Woods has on tour, his 82nd win. Started off with 3 bogeys that week. So it was 3 over through 3 holes. Everyone thought that Tiger Woods was just going to be checked out. Was over in Japan just to make his media appearance, that kind of thing. But boy, were we wrong. Ended up making 4 birdies out of his next 5 holes, carrying that momentum throughout the entire week to a very solid score of over 20 under par. I believe it was 23 under par that ended up winning that golf tournament. So it was an absolute shootout. So even with that start, at least that's what I remember with that golf tournament was, it got off to such a bad start, but still ended up winning, which is pretty miraculous when you take a look at it. In terms of a comp course here, this is just like Kasa Mugaseki, who, if you guys saw the Olympic Games, it's a very similar golf course. It's kind of a parkland style. That's why I call it more of an American golf course. You've got tons of trees, you've got a lot of water in play, and it looks a lot more like a Sedgefield Country Club or a lot more like a TPC Sawgrass than you'd expect for somewhere internationally. In fact, this course is also a par 70, so again, also like we saw at the Olympics, this is a course that is just over 7,000 yards, so also relatively short, so 7,041 yards. And for these tour players, that is going to be extremely gettable. So even though it is a par 70, Going to be tons of birdie opportunities on seemingly every single hole. This is a Kinya Fujita design. It was designed in 1965. And again, bent grass greens. So I mentioned it before, we have the 2 different strains of bent grass here, but both relatively pure bent grass. Just a little bit of a genetics difference. Obviously one of them better in the summer temperatures, one of them better in the winter climate. In terms of our fairways, we have Zozo fairways, which are very easy to apply spin on. These are whiskey fairways. It's a relatively light grass. And anytime I've played on Zozo, I've loved it. It's just, you feel like you always get a good lie. Again, you're never going to get a bad lie in the fairway. And on Bermuda, sometimes it happens. Sometimes the ball even sits down on these fairways, which seems a little bit unfair. But on Zozo, you're not going to have that problem. You also have the rough here. It's overseeded with bent grass. So it's more of like a Kentucky bluegrass type bent grass. Obviously not the same type of strain. You're only going to see that in the Midwest of America. But a little bit penal, probably I'd say about tour average in terms of its penality. These are probably going to have about 2 to 3 inches worth of rough. Again, we haven't seen anything from the course yet or anything on site yet, but last time you were here, it was about 2 to 3 inch rough. Was mowed the week of the event, so they weren't trying to make it extremely penal. And again, we saw a relatively low score, so it makes a lot of sense there. In a couple comp courses, we already talked about Kasamugaseki. Again, that's also a Japan course. We're going to be dealing with both of the greens there. They made the greens bigger at Kasamugaseki. They actually just combined the 2 greens for the Olympics. Here you're going to get the true 2 green style. So going to have some smaller greens because there's 2 of them. They can only fit in smaller greens. They can't make 2 massive green complexes there on every hole. A couple other courses I will compare to it. Obviously, these aren't going to have the 2 greens. TPC River Highlands, it's a short par 70, a course where you have dog-legged fairways. You also have a lot of tree-lined fairways. And really get done with your accuracy. And we're going to go through every hole here in a second. You guys will see what I mean. Looks very much so like TPC River Highlands. I'd also compare it to Sea Island, the course that they play over there for the RSM Classic. Hamilton Golf and Country Club, they play at the RBC Canadian Open. YLI Country Club, I think it's also very similar there, short par 70. And overall, this is going to be a birdie fest at a course where you essentially just got to be good with your ball striking. You're going to have to make sure you're not hitting in hazards off the tee. You're going to have to stick it close because these greens are very small. And overall, whoever brings their game and is in the most control of their game is going to win. It's no surprise we saw Tiger Woods win in that type of event before. Obviously, he was very controlled off the tee, was able to keep the ball in play, yet still put himself in scoreable positions, and there's no better iron player in the world than Tiger Woods, so no surprise there. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go hole by hole with you guys. They have a guide up on the website for the Zozo Championship, and give you guys an idea, a little taste of what the players are going to tackle this week. Cool, so now I've got this up for you guys here. You guys can see we have this up on the Zozo Championship website. On here, they have a complete hole-by-hole breakdown, which we're not going to have for every single golf tournament, but luckily enough, the people over there with Zozo have been fortunate enough to give this to us. So you can see par 70, like we said, 7,041 yards. So again, one of the shorter courses that they're going to see all year. I believe there's only 2 or 3 courses that are going to be shorter, one of them obviously being Pebble Beach. But let's talk about the first hole here. So you can see it's a relatively inviting hole, just 405-yard par 4. You can see we do have tree-lined fairways on each side, which is a characteristic that we were talking about earlier with this golf course. Only 1 fairway bunker, so perhaps that's one difference between this course and most American courses. Typically over on the US side of things, we're seeing 2 to 3 fairway bunkers per hole. So you can see there's obviously a green side bunker for each of these greens, which a little bit more characteristic of an American course, so perhaps going to be a little bit easier off the tee than we're used to seeing. In terms of these green complexes, you're dealing with slopes going from back to front. You can see that right here. And that's going to be a common theme at this golf course. Just like many American golf courses, long is going to be bad this week. You want to make sure that you're getting below the hole, you're setting yourself with easy putts. And last time you were here at the Zozo Championship, these greens were running at a 13.5 on the stint meter. So having those downhill putts is definitely going to cause players some problems. So perhaps taking some of the smarter golf players out there, some of the veterans on tour, will be a little bit helpful. Go over here to hole 2. This is a borderline drivable par 4. You can see, I believe they're playing this far green, this larger green here this time around. And the fact is, it's only really drivable if it's over here on the right? You see the tee boxes over here. You can be able to hit a fade over there to the shorter little distance over here. It's going to play all of 363 this week over here with this larger green. And to be honest with you, I expect most players to probably try to lay back. And it's going to lay back a significant distance. And a lot of that's due to this tree in the middle of the fairway. You guys can see that pesky little tree right there. If you end up hitting 3-wood, that's going to be right in your landing zone. If you end up hitting against the tree, if you end up blocking yourself out of that kind of thing, it's going to drive these players nuts. The problem is they can't even hit a driving iron, because if they hit a driving iron, they're going to be right behind that tree. They're going to have to either hook something around it, they're going to have to hit a fade or something like that. So you're going to see players hit short irons off the tee, like 7 or an 8 iron, or going to see them just hit driver and hope to hit it past that tree. Somewhere in play, something like that. A lot of the longer hitters, that's what I expect to happen. Somebody like Xander Schauffele, probably going to just try to hit it up here, avoid the bunkers. But you can see that brings in a lot of risk as well. You have 4 bunkers here. Essentially, no matter where you miss, there's going to be a bunker. So I love this golf hole. You can see very similar slopes on the screen from back to front. Going to be a theme we talk about here. This par 3 is very straightforward. It's 180 yards. There's not much bunkering to speak of. I mean, you can see that there's bunkers in front of these greens. There's a bunker behind it, but they're not really in play, right? Unless they put these pin locations on the very front of these greens. This is going to be a very gettable hole. In general here at the Zozo Championship, it's going to be a very warm, moist summer climate. That's what we get over here in Japan. And as a result, you're going to be able to apply spin to these golf balls. These greens are going to be very soft. And that's why we saw the winning score where it was over there in 2019 when Tiger won. I mean, these greens are undulating. They're not easy to read. They were running at a 13.5 on the stint meter. So there's definitely enough complexity there. Average golfer would go out there and shoot 100, that kind of thing. The reason why they're able to attack it so much was because of these soft conditions. And again, we expect that this week. We're going to have to get a word from the ground just to confirm that, just to make sure that it's still humid, it's still dealing with a lot of moisture. But holes like this 180-yard par 3 become almost a gimme birdies. I mean, when you're able to hit a 9 iron like you would be from 180 yards as a PGA Tour pro, you should be sticking it to 5 to 10 feet. So I definitely think this course is going to be gettable. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. If it ends up firming up, if by some reason there's been a drought there for a couple weeks, again, we don't know, we haven't had a word from the ground, then holes like this could get tough. Then we could start to see a winning score maybe closer to 7 or 8 under par. But in my opinion, in soft conditions, we're looking at a 20, maybe even 25 under par score winning, just like what we saw at the CJ Cup. Let's get to the next hole here. It's a little bit more of a demanding hole here. Here, the par 4, it's over 500 yards. You can see there's a lake on the left, so this is the first taste of water we get at this golf course. That's why I said it's very comparable to TPC River Highlands, because you're going to get plenty of holes that are just tree lined. You're not dealing with water or anything like that. And then you're going to have some driving holes that are extremely tough. I mean, water on one or even both sides. You can see over here we have bunkers guarding the right side, which if you end up bailing out to the right, make a really tough shot into the green, probably 250 yards, that kind of thing, over water. Or if you end up missing left, I mean, you're completely dead to begin with, right? You're taking a drop. So this hole, one of the few holes here, I do expect to play over par, even in some soft conditions. You can see the slope here, also a little bit funky, right? So they're playing this green up here in the top left. That's going to be the theme here, by the way, guys. Usually it's the one on the top left. That's the summer green. This is the winter green. You can see some side slopes here. So if they end up putting the pin location here in the front left, you can end up having that false front come into play. If you put it on the right, falling off into that bunker. So I do think this is a fun hole. Again, one of the few holes here that I do expect to play over par. This is also another par 3 I expect to be very gettable. So they should be playing it as this far green. For some reason, they have both greens on here, which makes me think that they may actually cycle between both of these here at the golf tournament. This is the only one so far where they've shown both greens, so keep that in mind. Either way, they're going to play very similarly. You can see you have water in play for both greens, and I'm expecting them to put these pins, right along this water line here, or even, up here in the top left or something like that, to bring the water into play. Just because this golf course is so gettable, they have to make a defense at some point. So I think this hole 5 is going to be very interesting. Going to be one of the more fun holes to watch here on this weekend. Hole 6 is a crazy dogleg right. If you guys saw that video on YouTube of Bubba Watson seemingly hitting it sideways off the tee box, going straight over the trees, having to have the entire crowd move, that kind of thing, that's this hole. So Bubba was teeing off from right here, and most people, just kind of hitting it out here, probably trying to cut off a little bit of the water, have about 250 yards in. Bubba Watson took this line. He ended up hitting it in like the rough or the trees over here on the right and had like an 8 iron in. So if Bryson was here, he's not. I wish he was. He probably would have tried to do the same thing. We might see some of the longer hitters, if they're out of it or something like that, go for it. But expect most players to try to take it over the water here. The water shouldn't be an issue unless you have a complete shank or a miss hit. Setting up a relatively easy shot into the green. You're looking at probably a 300-yard drive, landing right here, and about a 250-yard shot into the green. You can see very similar sloping. They're going to be using, it seems like this one on the right this time here. Again, same type of sloping from back to front. Over here in hole 7, very gettable par 3, and you'll see something very interesting about this golf course. It has 5 par 3s. Not something that we see every time on tour. That's why part of the reason why it's a par 70. But they're all relatively gettable. You can see there was only one of them that was approaching 200 yards. We had a 180-yard par 3. Now we have a 167-yard par 3. So definitely a hole to try and make a birdie on. There's no water in play. These are some of the biggest greens that we see in the entire course. Let's see, 31 by 35. Think that's a very gettable hole for these guys. Over here at hole 8, you have another gettable hole. It's not drivable by any means, but these guys are going to be hitting 3-wood off the tee and then hitting a wedge in. And you can see there's only one green here. The other green's probably over here, something like that, that they end up having before. So again, more of a gettable hole. You can see here in terms of the overhead shot, relatively thin fairway, and that's actually a theme here at this golf course. The fairways aren't going to be as expansive as something that we saw at the CJ Cup, but there's also not a ton of hazards, right? This rough, very easy to hit out of, not going to cause them any troubles in. Not a ton of fairway bunkers. So even though they are relatively thin fairways, I'm not so worried about accuracy off the tee. I'm a little bit more looking for distance just because this is going to be a birdie fest. We want guys that are setting themselves up with wedges. Now getting over here to hole 9. This is actually a relatively tough hole. I believe over here on the left, this is the driving range. So this is going to be an internal OB. So it actually adds quite a bit of challenge to this tee shot here. Over here on the right, you obviously have some force, which players are probably going to end up bailing out into. So I expect this hole to play right around par. Most of these other holes are going to be birdie holes. This is probably going to be a place where if you end up making a birdie, good for you, but you're really looking to just make 4 pars for the week. You can see just not a ton of bunkering. They're playing this green up here. The bunkering is more for that shorter green, if anything. So I think that they're going to get a little bit of a boost from that. It'll play right around par. Now, hole 10. So if you guys watched the replay of Tiger Woods back there in 2019, that's how I did a lot of this research, by the way. They have a YouTube video up showing every shot from that golf tournament. And if you guys have never done that before, it's a very good way to get acclimated with these golf courses, especially if it's one that we haven't seen in quite a while. And who doesn't love watching Tiger Woods going out there and win a golf tournament? So here, hole 10, this is where he hit the ball out of bounds on hole 1, ended up hitting it into this lake over here. Really comes into play because in order to make this a birdie hole, you're trying to hit the ball right about this range right here, set up a wedge, a good angle into the screen. They're playing this one over here. A lot of players are just going to bail out short, right? They're going to hit an iron over here in the rough, most likely, and set up a tough shot into the screen because they're going to stuff these pins up here in the front edge. So if you're coming out of the rough, you're not going to be able to apply spin. It's going to make it more of a par hole. So Tiger Woods was obviously very aggressive, especially on the first hole of a golf tournament, and tried to take off too much of that lake and hit it in the water. So it's an interesting hole. It's a risk-reward hole that's a little bit underrated in my opinion. And I'll just say I hope my golfers aren't starting on hole 10. That's something where you kind of want 9 holes under your belt. You kind of want to get into the round before you have to make this kind of decision, because to be sitting here on hole 10 and to have to make a risk-reward decision with your first shot is very uncomfortable. We'll just say that. Here at hole 11, we have a long par 4. So there was another 480-something yard par 4 on the other side. Again, I expect this one to play closer to par. You don't have a ton of hazards off the tee. You have a lot more bunkering at this hole. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bunkers there. Same type of slope that we're used to seeing with the rest of this golf course. And I think pretty much an average hole right there. You're going to look at right around a par average. This is also going to be a hole that's going to be a little bit more difficult. You can see it has some fairway bunkering here. It's a 490-yard par 4. And these 3 holes right here, 10, 11, 12, those are the 3 holes that Tiger Woods ended up bogeying going into the week. And they're tough holes, right? Even if you end up getting out to a tough stretch here, that shouldn't roll you out, though. We ended up winning that golf tournament at 23 under par. Things start to turn here at hole 13. They start to get a little bit easier with a 141 par 3. That is a pitching wedge, or even like a 56 degree for most of these tour players. Hell, I'd be hitting a soft pitching wedge into the screen. So again, you can see they're playing this one over here on the right. Relatively straightforward. You have these bunkers that are more protecting over the middle. They actually have 3. Is that right? No, that's fairway. I was like, they have 3 greens here? That's crazy. That's fairway right there. So I guess if you want to lay up, which I don't know who's laying up at 141 par 3. But it doesn't matter where they put these flags, right? They could stick them in these corners, especially this one over here with these bunkers. It's still going to be extremely gettable. Again, they're hitting a degreed wedge, and anytime you have less than a pitching wedge in a tour pro's hands, you're looking at fireworks. I expect to see a hole-in-one on this hole, right? Even because at that distance, I mean, these guys are just going to be playing target practice. Over here at hole 14, we have a long par 5. And I think the key to scoring this week is going to be taking advantage of these par fives, because we have so many par threes here. These tour players are not used to having so many par threes. So the guys with their irons are definitely going to be an advantage. I mean, typically only seeing four par threes. A lot of these par fours are also, iron shot holes where it's very easy off the tee. It's very wide open. You're getting a little bit more trouble into these greens. For that reason, definitely looking for people that are good with their long irons, but also looking for people that are just long in general, because both of these par fives are long, especially the one where they have that huge dog leg. You can't really cut it off unless you're somebody like Bryson DeChambeau or a madman like Bubba Watson. This hole especially, it's just straight up, and it's straight up 600 yards. So to reach into, you're going to have to be one of those guys that can get it out there 320, 330 yards and hit a bomb of a 3-wood into this thing. So distance definitely going to be playing a factor this week. We'll get to that here in my key stats, this hole especially. So let's go over the hole 15. So hole 15 is a gettable hole. It's 425 yards, uphill par 4. Very straightforward. They're playing this green over here for this week, over here on the right. Not much that needs to be said about it. That should be a birdie opportunity, something that plays right around like a 3.6, 3.7 in terms of shots. 16 right here, another gettable par 3. Again, there's so many of these par 3s, but they're all gettable. They're all less than 200 yards. These greens are undulating, but unless they stiff them next to the water, and you can see there's still some fairway over here, so the water's not even really in play. It's not going to cause much trouble. So I like that hole as another birdie opportunity. This hole right here, even though it's 491 yards, there are no fairway bunkers in play. You have relatively a good amount of space here outside the fairway to miss. And you can see the green here, they're playing this one over here on the right, is massive. So even though this is a long par 4, last time we saw this at the Zozo in 2019, actually, ended up playing under par. So I expect that to happen again. And finally, 18. This is our third par 5. So 5 par 3s, 3 par 5s, a little bit weird. Definitely what we're not used to seeing on the PGA Tour. This one's extremely gettable. So you're definitely looking at this being an eagle opportunity for every single person in the field. When you're teeing off, they're not going to be teeing off over here. They're landing somewhere in this range up here. So these fairway bunkers shouldn't even necessarily be in play unless they add a tee box really far back or something like that. In the approach shot into this, it's not really a problem at all. They're playing this green over here, so they're not playing this one far back here. The bunkers do come into play as a result, especially this one up here. It's a much shorter hole. It'd be closer to 600 yards if we were playing it on this screen over here, but it's definitely going to be a shorter one. And now let's talk about the guys we expect to succeed here at Narashino Country Club. So first of all, just a few review points from that course breakdown. We have the main defense being off the tee. You have to set up angles off of the tee. You have to make sure you're not blocking yourself out with trees. We have trees in the middle of fairways. We have overhanging limbs. So making sure that you're using a strategic approach here is going to be key. We also have greens that are relatively small. A lot of that's due to the 2 green setup. You're not able to have wide, expansive greens like we saw at the CJ Cup. So around the green, going to be a little bit more important this week than most. Also, shots gained approach, going to be a premium. Making sure that you're putting yourself in a position to score, but also making sure you're staying out of trouble is definitely going to be something that comes into play. But overall, with that being said, this is a pure ball strikers track. You're looking for people that score in bunches, that can keep themselves in play, and that can do it strategically. And I think you'll find that with our key stats here in a second. But at number 3 in our key stats, we have shots gained putting, specifically on bent grass, a lean towards bent grass putters. And a lot of that comes down to the scoring fest, right? We're expecting a score close to 22, 25 under par to win this event. So making sure that you can fill up the rock is going to be important. I mean, you can be a great ball striker, but if you're missing every putt that you have from 8 feet this week, you're not going to get to 25 under par. So it's not like it's the most important stat I'm looking at this week, but definitely something that gives people a boost, especially if they have a little bit of an inkling towards the bent grass surface. And number 2, we have shots gained approach, which is going to be important here at this golf course, especially at a birdie fest. Again, accuracy off the tee comes into play on a few holes, but distance off the tee and shots gained off the tee encapsulate that better than any other stat is going to be even more important. We have a 600-yard par 5. We have a 586-yard par 5. One that's a little bit more gettable, but making sure that you can put yourself on in 2 for all 3 of those is going to be vitally important. Again, we only have 3 par 5s here, something that we don't usually see on the PGA Tour. So making sure that you have that distance is definitely going to be helpful. There's also a few longer par 4s, not more than we're used to seeing at any other golf course, but having distance is always helpful, especially if you're looking for a very low score. But at number 1, and this is by far the most important statistic this week, this is where a majority of my analysis this week is going to stem from, and is shots gained approach. And we're adding a little bit of a boost to our short range stats. The people that are using wedges, the 100-yard range, the 100 to 25 range, that kind of thing, is going to be a little bit more important this week. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with relatively soft conditions. We're dealing with a birdie fest, so having guys that can just light it up with their shots gained approach stats is going to be a key differentiator this week. I mean, obviously, Tiger Woods won the last time out. We've seen Gary Player win here, Seve Ballesteros. What do those guys have in common? They're great ball strikers. They're immaculate ball strikers. They're some of the best players we've ever seen in our game, period. So this week, I do expect one of the cream of the crop kind of guys to succeed. We obviously have Colin Morikawa here. We have Xander Schauffele. Both of those guys fit this mold. You know, people that gain off the tee, especially Xander Schauffele in terms of his distance. Shots gained approach guys. I mean, both of them, some of the best iron players in the world, and we've seen them get hot with the putter. So I think it's one of those guys up top that ends up winning this week. It's a type of golf course where the cream of the crop always ends up rising. So you're looking at some of the ball strikers down low potentially having some success this week. I'm not sure if Corey Connors is playing. We're going to have to take a look at the field, a little bit of a better look, but guys like him should have a lot of success here. Just people that ball strike the absolute shit out of it. Obviously, gonna have to bring a putter as well this week, but if you don't have the ball striking, you're not even gonna have a chance to begin with. So that's what we think here about Narashino Country Club. That is all we've got for this week's course breakdown, guys. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments what you think the winning score is going to be. For me, I've got it at 24 under par right now, one better than Tiger Woods, and I'm expecting very similar conditions, soft conditions where guys can go out there and score. But Tiger Woods started with 3 bogeys and still got the 23 under par. So somebody this time around, obviously probably not going to start off to 3 over par, probably going to be keeping a little bit more momentum. And I think we get to 24 under par. But go ahead and let me know what you guys think. Would love to get some debate going down in the comments. As always, guys, I appreciate your support here on the channel. Appreciate you guys coming by. If you haven't already liked the video, make sure you go ahead and do so. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so as well. Over 40% of you that watch this video are not subscribed, but highly recommend you do so you don't miss any of the content I post in the future. So on top of these course breakdown videos, I do tons of daily fantasy sports content for golf. I cover the NFL in terms of Showdown. I cover the main slates for Draftkings on Showdown as well. I also cover MMA content, fantasy golf content in general, and more. So make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss any of that. We're going to have all the DFS content coming out for the Zozo Championship this week. Draftkings picks coming out later on this afternoon. And of course, our weekly PGA Tour live stream. That is every Wednesday night. This week going to be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Actually, I take that back. We're actually going to have to reschedule that. I'll let you guys know in our Draftkings pick when we're doing that because we have an early lock this week. It's in Japan, obviously a little bit of a time zone difference. So it may actually end up being Wednesday morning or even Tuesday night. So I'll let you guys know later on this afternoon what we're doing for that. But until then, guys, good luck with all of your lineups this week. Good luck with any of your bets if you guys are on the betting side of things, or just enjoy the golf tournament if you're just watching the Zozo Championship. You know, we got a very good field over there. World's very best, and again, I expect one of these studs to go out there and really impress us. So until then, guys, good luck, and I'll see you guys.